Good morning and welcome to the land of the living. I know that most of you in the morning does not involve talking about movies. However, I decided to talk about them this morning. I sometimes get up early to do exercises because I spend all day doing exercises. Sometimes I like to kind of have like a full day of exercises, in particular when I'm not working. I'm not working right now, today, so I'm going to do exercises all day. So enjoy. And Eli, if you're still watching, yes, I still have my morning smokes, as always, because I keep the dream alive. I go Vonnegut on these types of things, so Vonnegut smoked, and I figured, well, I'm not as good a writer as him, nor will I ever be, but why not enjoy the same type of lifestyle? This is the Sterkel Sessions Cult Classics. We're talking about another spin-off to the zombie movies. This is Night of the Living Dead. This is the 90s version of it. Let's take a look to see when exactly it was made. Give me one moment here. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to see. This was so hard to find. It was unreal. So you may have to go to Voodoo or something like that to find it. The DVDs for these are not exceptionally easy to find, and they are expensive. I do not see it, so let me open it up here, see if it gives us any tips to its origins. Nope. Oh yeah, 1990. So it was almost an 80s film. Almost an 80s film. I call it late 80s film. As I have always said with the cult classics, these are not child appropriate. Do not watch this one with a child. Unless you just like exposing them to really bizarre and weird cinema, and that's your choice. That's it's not something I would particularly do with children, but I'm not their parent, so I don't care. Night of the Living Dead, the 90s version, is in many ways superior to the 60s version of George Romero's. George Romero's masterpiece in zombie cinema will always be Dawn of the Dead, which was the last one I talked about. And since it's Halloween time, I thought I'd bring up a couple of cult classics that are in fact horror that you may or may not have seen, or if you've seen, you didn't remember it or haven't seen it for a while. So, just to remind you. This one had a lot bigger of a budget, not an extremely large budget by any way, shape, or form, but it's a horror film, so you don't have to have it. Again, this is in zombies in space, so there's not that need for it. But this one is not directed by George Romero, but it is written by him. Romero was really instrumental for the zombie movement that we see. It's kind of reaching its end now, its zenith. Its zenith was probably about the time that that guy beat Glenn to death with a bat. What's that guy's name? I don't know. Pipsqueak, something like that. I don't know. But he beat him to death with Lucy the vampire bat because she likes blood. So that was kind of the zenith of the zombie movement. After that, it was just kind of like, it's just going downhill. But you have to understand that when I started watching zombie films, it was about 1997, and this was the first one I had ever seen. And this is what got me interested in the original Dawn of the Dead, which was the 70s version in the mall. That sweet Laramie flavor. Anyway, so and I saw this on a really old television movie station. I think it's called The Movie Station. I think it's called TMC, The Movie Station. And it was playing, and I watched it, and it was at the very end when Barbara had escaped, blah, blah, blah. But I was really intrigued by it, and I wanted to know more. So this is really what started with me, the zombie movement. Now, I was out of the zombie movement by about the time Walking Dead came out. I'm sorry, Trisha, but it's true. I never really got into the series because I had seen all the zombie stuff that I had wanted to see at that particular point. I had seen many, many, many zombie films at that point, so there wasn't really a need to have an entire series. And I picked it up from pieces on the television series, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that I was just done with it by then. So, and I'd like to state for the record, although my brother disagrees with me wholeheartedly, is that I was well into A Christmas Story before anyone else was into A Christmas Story. This is a fact. He may use his powers of persuasion to tell you otherwise, but I was way into The Christmas Story before anyone else was. So that's a fact. So just you can take it as fact. But regardless, Night of the Living Dead, the remake, the '90s remake, and there have been several remakes of this. So this is one in particular that was directed by Tom Savini, Savini. Okay, so that's the one you want to look for because this is the best version of it. And again, you'll see also that Romero wrote the script along with John Russo, who I don't know who that is, but they decided to write it together. So there you go. But this is just a masterful story. And the one thing I like about Romero's films, as opposed to a lot of standard action films, is that there are characters that you firmly dislike. I think that's kind of a lost art in today's cinema. Is that there are characters that you just absolutely dislike. This movie is no exception to that. So there are characters that you just don't care for from the beginning. They just rub you the wrong way, and they'll just continue to do that. And there are characters that you deeply care about instantly too. It's kind of like more realistic to life because there are many people that you see in life where you're like, I don't really care about that person, and there are people in life that you're like, oh, that seems like a really decent person, and it's on first impression. But regardless of what you think about my views on life, which are pointless, I like it because of the way that the characters interact in this particular story. Not to say that the '60s version didn't have that either. They interacted very, very well in that one too. It's just that this one had a better budget, okay, and it was more the actual vision that he intended for the film, I believe. And it was modernized and feminized to a certain degree because Barbara is a lot stronger in this film than she is in the '60s version. In the '60s version, she sits on a couch literally the majority of the film crying, and that's about her role. In this one, she takes charge, so it is more feminized for kind of a take charge woman. Um, them go getters out there. You know why? Because they go out and get it. But again, I would highly recommend that you watch this '90s version before you watch any other zombie stuff if you've not gotten into zombie stuff. Why? Because that's what I did, and how I did it was perfect. So that's it. We can stop right there. And Night of the Living Dead also is a great understanding for an entry filmmaker. Okay, like if you want to make like a small budget production and you don't have a lot of money, this is what you do. This is a step by step on how to make a film with almost no budget. Okay, both of them are. The '60s version even better than this one, but this is how to get character out of it and still have conflict that's reasonable and realistic. This is why people start off in the horror genre when they direct. This is why my first screenplay that I wrote to sell commercially is a horror piece. It's not that I'm drawn to horror any more than any other genre. I'm certainly not. It's that this is the bread and butter of what people see and buy in cinema. Okay, because both sexes like horror film. Okay, there are very, very few um, genres of film that both sexes can cross over. These are date movies, right? You'll either go see a romantic film or a horror film. Usually, if you go on a date, that's kind of like a standard operating procedure for dates, right? You may go see like a Marvel movie or something like that, but usually you go see that with your buddies. Like that's just the way that kind of goes. But these are like date movies, right? So, and most people that date are young, and most people that are young are the ones that spend money on movies. I mean, I'm an exception. So, I mean, I go see movies all the time, but that's completely because I don't have kids and I don't really have any responsibilities other than my dog. And so that's not a typical person. So, um, this is where the money is spent. You can with horror you can almost always make your money back even if it's a terrible film. How many movies have you gone to see that were horror that were absolutely awful yet made their money? It just happens. It just does. It's kind of magical in a way, and that's why so many directors get their first breaks doing horror. And I could go down the list. It's so extensive it's not even worth repeating. Like it's almost every director you can think of. I mean, there are exceptions to that. Orson Welles certainly didn't have to do it. But, I mean, we're not Orson Welles. I'm not Orson Welles. I'm not making Citizen Kane 2 Electric Boogaloo, where Citizen Kane comes back from the grave. And this time he's not only after Rosebud, he's after vengeance. Rosebud. Sorry, this mythic look of of him coming out of the fire with Rosebud. At the end, when they throw Rosebud into the furnace, he comes out of the fire and he's like, "You have destroyed Rosebud. Now you must pay." He blows everybody away. I don't know. It's too early in the morning for that nonsense, I suppose. Um, but regardless, as I said before, this is a great Halloween film. It is. We're coming up on Halloween, so this is a great Halloween film. It's something that I do believe. I want to stress this: with any film, you can show it to young people, okay? Because it's rated R. I mean, it is up to the parent to decide what they want their kid to be exposed to, okay? So let's be 100% clear. Like some parents, like they don't like sex in cinema, but gore, horror, and action violence is totally fine with them. Okay. And some parents, I don't know, it's not the vast majority, but don't mind like sexual content, but gore, blah blah blah. That's something different. I'm sure there are some, not very many, but that may be what they preference that they have. I doubt it, but there may be. So again, you make your decisions, but I can tell you as a family unit, the best movies to watch as a family unit are horror films because everybody likes horror. And I said there's very, very few genres of movies that even come close to that. Maybe comedy. Comedy may be the only other one that both genders, but then comedy is so specific too, because there are certain things that women like in comedy, and there are certain things that men like in comedy, and the two shall never meet. But horror is the rare exception where both meet up. So you can show it to a family, but this is intensely violent and it has horror aspects in it. So just be forewarned that you may want to preview it to make sure that you want to watch it with your kids. But it's a great Halloween movie. So I think I've kind of talked this one to death. It's just because I like this one and it's very nostalgic for me because it really started. There was a few films before that started my love for cinema, but this film really started my interest in film making. So it's kind of like near and dear to my heart. But I'm going to leave it at that, and until then, El Vita Zen.